Horizon is what every living being not only genuinely desires, but heartily pursues and intentionally invests in. For in the gathering of men, only those whose minds are in tune with the dynamics of the past, present, and future innovations, inventions, politics, and governance are respected. We are Spectrum Television, and broadening your horizon is our obsession. Risk on your decoder now to connect Spectrum Television on the frequency 12589, symbol rate 26250. That is frequency 12589, symbol rate 26250. Polarization horizontal, and join our online community at spectrumtvlive.ng. For further inquiries, please call 0704 158 5642 or 0704 541 7707. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Good afternoon and welcome. This is Spotlight Africa. We're coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. I am Huyai Imam. Today on Spotlight Africa, Uganda's NRM endorses Museveni as candidate for 2026 presidential election. Tanzania's President Hassan cleared to run in October's election. DR Congo, M23 rebels begin Qatar-brokered peace talks in Doha. Equatorial Guinea president's son convicted for selling national plane. Plus, Africa launches cholera response plan as Sudan faces deadly surge. These stories are all just ahead on Spotlight Africa. Stay with us. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. To begin Spotlight Africa this afternoon, we head to Uganda, where the ruling party, National Resistance Movement, has endorsed President Yoweri Museveni as its candidate for next year's general election and his seventh term as leader of the East African nation. 80-year-old Museveni accepted the nomination on Wednesday in a speech to the party's delegate conference in Kampala and thanked the party for putting its trust in him once again. Museveni first took office in 1986 as the head of a rebel force. He has since been elected 6 times after securing constitutional amendments to remove presidential term limits and an age cap. Should he win in January, it would bring him close to 5 decades in power in the East African nation. Waving a NRM pamphlet, Museveni used the occasion to tout his party's achievements. Critics have warned that Museveni has veered into authoritarianism with virtually no opposition, including within the NRM. Museveni says criticism of his long stay in power is unjustified because he is re-elected every 5 years. Notably, he has a large following in rural areas where Ugandans cite relative peace and security among reasons to keep him in power. Meanwhile, lawyers for Salvadorian national Kilma Abrego Garcia on Wednesday told the federal judge he wants to seek asylum in the United States. The 30-year-old has come to encapsulate much of President Donald Trump's hardline immigration agenda. Abrego Garcia gained international attention after he was wrongly deported to a notorious jail in El Salvador in March. Facing a court order, the administration brought him back months later and promptly detained him on human smuggling charges. It also claimed he is a member of the dangerous MS-13 gang, an allegation Abrego Garcia denies. Now, it wants to deport him to Uganda, but his lawyers argue that he has the right to express fear of persecution and torture there. They say sending him to Uganda would be punishment for successfully fighting his deportation, refusing to plead guilty to the charges, and seeking release from a Tennessee jail. Abrego Garcia has also told immigration authorities he would prefer to be sent to Costa Rica if he must be removed from the United States. He entered the U.S. illegally as a teenager in 2011 after fleeing gang violence and is married to a U.S. citizen with whom he has children. In 2019, an immigration judge denied his request for asylum because he applied more than a year after he had arrived in the country. In another development, Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan has been approved to stand in October's presidential election. It is Hassan's first time running for the presidency. She assumed the office following the death of her predecessor, John Magufuli, in 2021. After her nomination was cleared, Hassan shared a post on X urging her Chama Champunduzi CCM party to maintain unity to ensure victory for their party. She's facing a field clear of her main rivals after the country's electoral commission on Wednesday disqualified the candidates of the second largest opposition party, Luhaga Mfina, of the Alliance for Change and Transparency. Was barred over complaints that the party had failed to comply with nomination procedures in the primaries. Mfina, a government critic and a former ruling party member of the East African country's parliament, defected from CCM earlier this month. Recall that leading opposition party Chadema was disqualified in April after it failed to sign the Electoral Code of Conduct as part of its call for electoral reform. Chadema chairman Tudu Lissu has been in jail for over 4 months after being charged with treason early in April. He has denied the charges. Lissu's detention and unexplained abductions of government critics in recent months have shone a spotlight on Hassan's human rights record. Hassan says her government is committed to respecting human rights. Meanwhile, nominations for presidential candidates closed on Wednesday. Away from that, prominent Kenyan social justice campaigner and government critic Boniface Mwangi on Wednesday said he plans to run for president in the 2027 elections. His announcement comes weeks after the latest round of deadly protests against President William Ruto, which have seen more than 100 people killed since June last year. For years, Mwangi has faced tear gas and jail time as he spoke out against corruption and police violence. The 42-year-old's candidacy will test whether popular support for the protest, led by young Kenyans, can be translated into an electoral movement. Rights groups have condemned police brutality and criticized the government's use of terrorism charges against protesters. In announcing his candidacy, Mwangi, and an outspoken critic of Ruto, described the country as broken and in danger of becoming a failed state. He pledged to arrest all corrupt politicians and to lead a new Kenya founded on democratic values, justice, and equity. In separate development, a new round of talks between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwandan-backed M23 rebels is underway in Doha. The two parties are looking to reach agreement on how to implement a Qatari brokered truce they signed last month. Reports say despite that deal and an earlier one signed between Kinshasa and Kigali in Washington, fighting has continued in the DRC's North and South Kivu provinces. The latest round of talks will focus on a draft proposal put forward by Qatar for a three-phase peace process. Qatar's foreign ministry says it involves plans to create a mechanism for monitoring the truce as well as an exchange of prisoners. Away from that, a court in Equatorial Guinea convicted a son of the country's president for illegally selling off a plane belonging to the national airline. The judge ruled on Tuesday that Ruslan Obiang, one of the sons of President Theodore Obiang Nguema Mbasongo, must serve 6 years in jail unless he compensates the state for the missing aircraft. Supreme Court Press Director Hilario Mitogo told reporters the court convicted Obiang 50, a former director of national carrier SIBA Intercontinental, of selling the ATR 72500 plane to a Spanish company and pocketing the cash. He was placed under house arrest in 2023 on the order of his half-brother, the country's vice president Theodoro Nguema Obiang, also a son of the president. Mitogo said the court ruled that Obiang could avoid jail if he paid around $255,000 to the airline, along with damages and a fine to the state. The court acquitted him on separate charges of embezzlement and abuse of office. Obiang has also served as Secretary of State for Sports and Youth in the oil-rich Central African state, ruled for the past 46 years by his father, who is 83. In a separate case targeting the half-brother, a French court handed Obiang Magwe a suspended jail sentence and a $35 million fine in July 2021 after convicting him of embezzling public funds. Meanwhile, a court in Equatorial Guinea has sentenced a senior government official, Balshaza Ebang Egonga, to 8 years in prison for embezzlement, months after he became notorious over linked sex tapes with other officials' wives. According to the Supreme Court Press Director Hilario Mitongo, the Bioko Provincial Tribunal convicted Balshaza Ebang of diverting money claimed as professional travel expenses for personal use. Ngonga, the married former head of the National Financial Investigation Agency, and 5 other senior officials were accused of embezzling expenses worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in the oil-rich Central African state. South African politician Julius Malema found guilty of hate speech. Stay tuned for details of this and more after this timeout. Thanks for staying tuned. To bring you the rest of the stories on Spotlight Africa, looking at the continent holistically, Africa is stepping up efforts to tackle cholera with the launch of a new continental emergency preparedness and response plan. This comes as Sudan battles a sharp surge in infections, recording over 1,000 new cases in just 1 week. The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in partnership with the World Health Organization, has unveiled a continental cholera emergency preparedness and response plan in Lusaka, Zambia. The plan aims to strengthen early detection systems, rapid response capacity, and cross-border cooperation as the continent faces recurrent outbreaks often fueled by climate shocks and fragile health systems. In Senegal, it remains in a strict financial limbo as the International Monetary Fund IMF says it will take several more weeks before it can present the country's debt misreporting case to its executive board. The delay follows intensive discussions between the IMF teams and Senegalese officials over corrective measures to address the discrepancy. The case stems from a dramatic revelation in September 2024. Senegal's hidden debt had ballooned from $1.9 billion to over $11 billion, triggering the freezing of a previously approved $1.8 billion IMF lending program. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko has unveiled a sweeping recovery plan aimed at stabilizing the economy through domestic financing. The plan commits to funding 90% of the initiative with internal resources, reducing future reliance on external debt. Senegal is also rebasing its economy for the first time since 2018 in hopes of recalibrating its debt to GDP ratio to more manageable levels. These steps mark a critical pivot for Senegal as it seeks to restore investor confidence and unlock stalled international support. In South Africa, Julius Malema, a politician, has been found guilty of hate speech for comments he made at a 2022 political rally. The country's Equality Court ruled the statement demonstrated an intent to incite harm, but Malema's far-left Economic Freedom Fighters Party said it had been taken out of context. Malema featured in the video U.S. President Donald Trump played to South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa during a meeting at the White House earlier this year. Trump falsely accused the South African government of sanctioning the murder of white farmers in order to steal their land. The U.S. has since cut off financial aid to South Africa, alleging anti-white and anti-American policies. Malema was previously convicted of hate speech in a separate case for repeating an apartheid-era chant at rallies that contains the words "shoot the Boer," referring to South Africa's white Afrikaner farmers. The verdict was later overturned. Equality courts deal with allegations of discrimination and can order those found guilty to issue a public apology, pay compensation, or face criminal prosecution. No order has yet been made regarding Malema's punishment in this latest case. Malema, who is a lawmaker but not in government, has often been condemned in his own country for his political speech. He was twice denied a visa to travel to the UK this year because of his public statements, which include support for Palestinian militant group Hamas. Still in South Africa, an influencer linked to a controversial job scheme in Russia has apologized for her role in promoting it in a country where many young people are desperate to find jobs. Sian Boji, whose real name is Honor Zuma, came under scrutiny after one of the videos she posted online advertising jobs for women aged between 18 and 22 went viral. It prompted the government to issue a warning about the scheme and alert people to the dangers of human trafficking and unverified job opportunities overseas. Popularly known as Sian, the influencer removed the promotional videos from her social media pages. They had described an opportunity for a fresh new start for young women at the start of their careers. In a video shot in Tatarstan in Russia and posted over the weekend on TikTok, where she has a 1.7 million follower base, Sian had said it was a 2-year start program for those wanting to acquire professional skills, though it was not made clear in what professions. She had explained those hired would be given jobs and taught how to speak Russian. There have been allegations that some of those recruited to work in Tatarstan have ended up working in a weapons factory, making drones that have been used in Russia's war in Ukraine. In Nigeria, there has been a ban on the export of raw shea nuts for 6 months in a bid to grow its local shea butter industry and capture more value from the global market. The country is one of the world's biggest producers, responsible for nearly 40% of the annual crop. But despite this, Nigeria makes up just 1% of the $6.5 billion global shea market because most of its nuts are shipped out without being processed. Vice President Kashim Shettima of Nigeria announced the ban in Abuja, called the situation unacceptable. He said the goal is to transform Nigeria from a supplier of raw nuts into a global hub for refined shea products used in cosmetics, food and pharmaceuticals. Shea butter, extracted from the fruit of the shea tree, is widely used in beauty products as well as in making chocolate, ice cream and some medicine. The trees grow naturally across the shea belt of Africa, stretching from west to east, and are often harvested by small-scale farmers, especially women. Agriculture Minister Abubakar Kyari said Nigeria produces about 350,000 tons of shea nuts each year, but nearly a quarter of it is lost to informal, unregulated cross-border trade. Experts say the ban could bring big benefits if properly managed. Dr. Ahmad Ismail of the Federal University of Mina said poor farmers often sell their harvest cheaply to middlemen who exploit the lack of regulation. And to conclude the news this afternoon, a report by Human Rights Watch HRW says Mauritania's security forces have been systematically abusing migrants from other African countries. The rights group alleges that the violations have been exacerbated by a deal with the European Union and Spain, which aims to curb dangerous sea crossings to the Canary Islands. It documents how migrants and asylum seekers often trying to leave Mauritania have been subjected to rape, torture and extortion at the hands of the military, border personnel and other security staff. Mauritania has rejected the findings, saying it has taken recent steps to protect migrant rights. The European Commission has said its deal is anchored in upholding rights. Mauritania has become an increasingly common departure point for African migrants trying to reach Europe via Spain's Canary Islands by boat. Nearly 47,000 people reached the islands last year after making the extremely perilous crossing over the Atlantic Ocean. This has been Spotlight Africa, brought to you by Spectrum Television, bringing you news all around the continent. Do ensure to follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtvlive.ng. Spotlight Africa, we are AMM. Thanks for watching. Good afternoon.